Okay, should we start? What? Anton, what do you say? Should we start? What? Two. Two speakers and
There's six other people. Oh, but we're also one person and okay.
Yeah, I see a few.
Some people.
So we have Rhinus and Franz and Julieanna. Yeah, okay. Okay, guys, so we're going to start. So my name is Aharon Ariel Lavi. I run the Hacker project. I'm also writing my PhD at Ben-Gurion University of the Negev. I've been dealing with detention communities in Israel and all over the Jewish world for the last 20 years. And what we're going to talk about today is about detention communities in the Jewish world outside Israel. So not the kibbutz movement and all that, but outside in the context of this conference. We're going to talk about the tension between communities that are trying to preserve a very particular heritage and religion and tradition as communities, but they do it in a very universalist or progressive environment and values that they subscribe to. There's a tension here that we'll talk about. So I'm going to open with a 15-20 minutes introduction and overview, and then we'll hand it over to Sephirah from Vermont, who is on the screen. Then we'll go back to Deborah, who is here from New York, and then Roger from Berkeley, California. And then we'll see if we'll need to take some time for questions and stuff like that. Okay? So I'm not going to give you the full presentation, just a few highlight points that I would like to share. So I want to start with a question to the audience first. I need a volunteer in this huge crowd. Okay, Anton. Let's say you park your car in Copenhagen, 500 this year, sorry, 2022. You park it on the wrong place where there's no parking allowed, and then you go to Dan, who's a judge. Policeman takes you to Dan, who's a judge. Then, what would be the first question you ask Anton, the judge? Is this your car? Anton, any ideas? Another question?
What I would say at that point in time, would I tell the truth? I would say, yes, this is my car. It's a nice car, isn't it? I parked it in this space, yes.
And then you go on, why? Now, if it was Paz, would you ask the same questions? If it was Chaba? Okay. Now, let's go 500 years back in time. Still Copenhagen. Well, not Copenhagen, what? I think it was Vikings back then. But anyway, some European city, 16th century. And again, Anton, you parked your donkey in the wrong place in the city, and you go to Dan. Now, what would be the first question?
Yeah, this is my donkey.
Well, no, there will be another question. It's a tricky one. That's what I. The first question you would ask him would be, which community do you belong to? Because back then there were different judicial systems for different communities. If you're a noble, if you're a knight, if you're a Jew, yeah, are you in my community? Can I judge you? If not, I'll just pass you on to the. All the systems back then were communal, and actually there was no reality outside the community. The first person considered to be the first individual to live outside the community. Again, in Europe, in Western tradition. I'm not talking about China and the Aztecs. I'm talking about Western tradition. So the first person to live outside any community was Baruch Spinoza in Amsterdam, around this year, 1500s. He was excommunicated from the Jewish community, and he did not join the Christian community, and he's considered the first person to be outside any community, which today is self-evident. Now, I'm not gonna spend a lot of time on all of the implications of this situation. I do want to talk about one point and then jump to the particular Jewish situation. So, We talked about it also in the last session. Those who were in the room. About the diminishing sense of belonging. So what happens is that when people lose their sense of belonging, where they don't feel they have a community, they have a framework they belong to, they will seek for it somewhere else. Because the need for belonging is existential. It's not something. It's not a privilege. It's not an add-on. It's something that we cannot live without. People will kill for a sense of belonging, and they will die for their sense of belonging. Now, what happens is that when communities dissolve, and all you have is yourself, maybe your family, and then the next level you can identify with is either the nation or some ideological movement that you're part of, the progressive movement, the conservative movement, the climate movement. These amorphic, huge amount of people. So what happens is that we go down to the lowest common denominator, which brings us together, which leads, I'm doing this very quickly because it's more complicated, but it leads to two phenomena on two edges or two ends of the spectrum, which will lead us to this tension between particularism and universalism. So on the one hand, you have populism, nationalist populism. People just identify with a nation, but it's not with real people. It's with an imaginary group of the nation. And then if someone strays away, does something which is like so to speak against the nation, against the national narrative, they have to be marginalized because that's how we define the group. Now, on the other hand, you can see on the progressive side the cancel culture. So, if, for example, I guess you all heard the case was maybe in your university 2 years ago that a professor used the N-word. It was one of the Ivy Leagues. Yeah. Well, yeah, he used the N-word to criticize it, but it wasn't promoting racism. He was trying to explain to his students why we're not using this. It's like saying the name of God in Judaism. Like he just said that word and he was completely canceled. And I don't know if he was fired because he's tenured, but he was pretty much marginalized from academic life. So that's part of the of things that we see more and more. And the reason, again, there are many reasons. This one of the reasons that when I'm trying to analyze this, is that because we need a sense of belonging, but there's no real community that we're part of, so we need to maintain the large group that we're part of quite aggressively. Otherwise, we'll be left with nothing. Now, I want to jump fast forward. I'm going to jump over all the social capital. This is stuff you all know, and also we don't have the time for that. And I want to give you the context of what we do. So this is a quote from Yuval Noah Harari, not his famous book, from another book. But anyway, he says that even if during the 21st century, humans will be upgraded to gods, as of 2018, this was published 4 years ago, there are still animals originated in the Stone Age. In order to prosper, they need intimate communities. Now, this is very essential. Okay, intimate communities, not just a huge group of random people. Has to be people you know. Now, which leads us to why we invest so much in communities in this project, and then we'll see the American context. I'm going to skip on this. That's weird. Moved here, but it doesn't move there. I mean, it moved on my computer, but it doesn't move on this large screen. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing and then try to share again. Oh, of course. Connection problems. Yeah. Okay. Logging back online. Okay. Okay, good. So how do we define a community for the purpose of this conversation? We define a community as a group sharing 4 things. A group that shares space, time, vision, and mission. Space means that they live in the same area, not necessarily the same building, like Anton's community, but at least in the same neighborhood, and they meet physically. So we do not consider virtual communities as communities. They have to meet in person. Pi means that they meet periodically and pretty often. It's not a one-off event. It's not Burning Man. They meet at least once a month, hopefully more than that. Vision means that they adhere to a certain set of values which they all agree on. They don't need to agree on everything. They need to agree at least on some things that create a shared identity. And a mission, once they have all the other pieces in place, the group as a group does some sort of a social mission, which can be education, can be arts and culture, can be, we'll hear the examples in a minute. Okay, another thing before we jump to the Jewish case, the size of communities. So we talked about intimate communities. I guess most of you, or half of you at least, have heard the name Dunbar, the feminist anthropologist. And without going into all of his research, he basically argued that we have a certain bandwidth for meaningful intimate connections or relationships that we can actually maintain. So we can't really have 5,000 friends, even though we have 5,000 people on our Facebook page. We can only maintain around 150 meaningful connections or relationships. If you subtract friends from work, family, past connections, stuff like that, you usually remain with about 60 to 80 empty slots for an average Western person. That's why we try to keep our communities at around 60 to 70 members. Now, putting this in context, so this is the state of Israel, this very small dot in the Middle East. That's the only country in the world where Jews are the majority. In all other places, they are the minority and a very small minority. So, for example, this is Denmark. So here they're like 0.5% of the population. United States, Jews are 2 to 2.5%. South Africa, less than 1%. Actually, there's no other country where it goes more than 2%, give or take. So it's a small minority. It's usually an impactful minority in terms of the wealth and academic degrees and whatever the power that it holds. It's usually a significant minority, but still a minority. Now the question is, what happens when you try to maintain Jewish communities? Or actually, let's start with why even maintain them. So the project we're talking about here is called Hakel. Hakel comes from the word Kehila, which is community in Hebrew. It's a verse from the Bible, which says, gather the people, men, women, children, everybody together. Now, why invest in this? Let me jump on this. Oh, I think I have a connection problem again. Can you see me on the screen? Okay. Here. Oh, okay, just a second. Try to fix the network problem.
Would it help if you use my
Yoko?
hotspot? No? Okay. Let me share my screen again. We're sorry for the technical problems. We'll be back in a minute. Okay. Okay, so to put this in context, so
I'll explain it this way. Well, half the crowd is Jewish, so well, still to put it in context for all of us. Jewish people is about 14 to 15 million people nowadays. It used to be 18 million, 1939, for the Holocaust. So we still haven't recovered to the numbers we had before, and that's 74 years, and still haven't done this. Even back then, 18 million is really not a lot compared to the size of humanity. And the Jewish people has, whether it's justified or not, I'm not trying to talk about it from a research point of view, has a ongoing concern about its size and ability to survive and pass it on to the next generation, because it's so small and so vulnerable. Now, when in many different research projects on American Jewry, on diaspora Jewry, we see it as a challenge that maintaining Jewish identity in outside Israel is not trivial. It requires effort. It requires investment. Jewish education is very expensive. There are many different aspects to this. Now, what we see, what we argue as an axiom, is that community is the second most important component in Jewish identity. I think it's true for any identity, for that matter, because you cannot really maintain an identity just as an individual. And then what happens is what we showed in the beginning. You go to the nation level or the ideological movement level, and that creates other kinds of problems. So that's one opportunity. The challenge, though, is that a growing proportion of young adults is disaffiliating with traditional communities, and I think that's true across the board, not only the Jewish people. People are moving away, either it's churches or synagogues or community centers. All the heavy old structures are losing ground consistently, and that's true all over the world, not only in America. So the problem is the existing communities are not doing this all that well. So what happens is that young people are starting to create their own grassroots communities, their own grassroots initiatives, but that's not trivial. And what we see, and that's a problem we're trying to solve, is that all those logos. These are different organizations that have alumni. But what happens is that when we have those small groups popping up all over the world, but as they go through time, through this funnel, only about 20% of them will succeed and become full-fledged, sustainable, intentional communities. And even those who succeed will be scattered and just disconnected from one another. And what we're trying to do is really to expand this and raise the chances of success, and we'll see two examples in a minute. And at the end of the day, also connect them in a network that makes more sense and keep them together for the long term. So I'm not going to say too much. Let's just one more point. How do we do it? So the way to do it is two main things. Each community gets a tailor-made mentoring program, some professional advisor that helps the community sustain itself and build itself in a more professional manner, and networking with other communities around the world. I'm going to skip this, and then the impact at the end of the day is that after 7 years of project, what we can see is that once we intervene, the chances of success rise from 20% to 70%, and at the end of the day, you get a network of communities and not only individual communities. So right now, Oshkello has show just the numbers quickly. So we started in 2013 with 0 communities, grew slowly. Then the Israeli government decided to help us. Now we have about 140 communities in 30 different countries and all over the world. So what we're going to do now, in the next hour or so, is hear briefly from 3 of those communities. The examples we have here are primarily from the United States, but our communities, as you saw in the large map, in South Africa, Latin America, Europe, Eastern Europe, Ukraine, Australia, South Korea even, which are all part of a large network. And what we try, so every community is going to talk for about 10, 12 minutes and give us a sense of why they do what they do, how they do it, and how it all connects to the larger framework of trying to sustain a particular identity in the context of progressive universalist values and worldview. Oh, sorry. So this is number. So this is the number of communities. The green line is an aggregate of events, seminars, conferences that we had. So there's a drop here due to COVID 2020, and then it starts going back up. And the blue line, that's in tens of thousands. That's the total number of outreach, total number of participants, which was about 25,000 in last year, 2021. Okay, and we hope that this green line will continue rising, and there won't be like another COVID wave, but nobody really knows. So, without further ado, I'd like to pass it on to Sephirah. Sephirah, can you hear us? Are you on mute?
Hi, yes, I'm here and I can hear you. And
Okay,
yeah,
great. So now you can share your screen, and the floor is yours. I'm gonna time you for like 10 to 12 minutes. Okay.
okay, great. All right. So yeah, I don't know who's in the audience there at the place. So okay, nice.
So we have a small but high quality group. Don't worry.
Yes. Great. I like that. That's important, right? That makes that intimate communities connection like you were talking about, Aharon. So yeah, I just want to say thank you to Aharon and to Hakel for supporting Living Tree Alliance in its growth and inviting me to participate in this panel. And I would say that it has been, it's been really helpful for me to be part of a network in forming a community. And so I am a co-founder for Living Tree Alliance, which is in Moortown, Vermont, which is in central Vermont in the United States. And we have a threefold mission. One part is that we are a residential co-housing village, and we are still in the building phase. And I'll come back to that. And then we also have a working homestead farm and a nonprofit that runs an education center that is both runs secular farm field trips and field trips and events and celebrations that are connected to the rhythms of the Jewish calendar. And so it's a lot of work, and it's exciting work to do this and build community together. Our co-housing village is sited for 7 dwellings and 7 household units. And we currently have 4 of those units built out and 3 families living here currently. And we are still looking to fill those other lots. I'm gonna share my screen and share a little a 3-minute video with you, and then I'm going to tell you a little bit more about our nonprofit and our events. And I'll just name before I share the screen is that we're really trying to link these 3 aspects together so that they all inform each other, and that the residential community can hold a strong our connection together and meet, but then we open up our community to the wider community where people come in for our celebrations, and that is, I think, creating that intimate connection with meaningful gatherings that are connected to the earth and connected to community, and then also connected to tradition. So you'll get a little snippet of it in the video, and our community, we keep adding things. So every time people come here, they're like, wow, there's another thing added. So this video already is not showing exactly what it's like here because we have another building there up. But so let me see. Okay. Okay.
In the heart of the Mad River Valley, a multi-generational, ecologically driven community of individuals and families are actively building a meaningful, integrated life experience. Living Tree Alliance is redefining community, regenerating soil, and revitalizing culture. Forward together with connection to the land, authenticity, spirituality, and resiliency.
I'd like to say that Living Tree Alliance, we're weaving together 3 different initiatives. One is a residential community There is a working farm / homestead, and the third part is enrichment programs that are part of our education center. And we have secular programs and programs that are more related to the Jewish calendar. The Jewish calendar and the Jewish tradition is really based on an agricultural system. And over the last how many thousands of years, it's become more of the people of the book and learning about the books. And we're really bringing it back to the land. There you go. You know, living in a multi-generational community, there's skills that are passed on with your hands and also through doing things that are necessities of living on the land. Although we frame things academically, it's really giving youth the chance to solve problems together. And we try to help kids create learning by having an experience and then challenging their learning and then having another experience and having kids share their learning rather than us telling them what they should think. It's seasonal, and the education is assuming that children have souls and that the souls are nourished through games and song and beauty.
I think we're currently being challenged to trust ourselves. I think this is really a time to learn anew how we can trust ourselves. And we can trust ourselves to make good decisions. We can trust ourselves to take care of our family. We can trust ourselves that we don't need all the knowledge to be in alignment with the space we embody and the space we settle into.
Every Shabbat in the summer, we do flowers and we have flowers in the pot.
Communication and collaboration are growing at Living Tree.
It's really important for us to define for ourselves what enough is and spend time really defining our terms.
So that's a little snippet of what's going on here, and you can see the land. I would say a big piece of our nonprofit is linking the land and spiritual connection to Judaism and to community, but we're really working hard to keep it accessible to all people, and we say that. And we believe that our tent is open to all people, and that the values that we're teaching and the connections that we're creating are universal. And so many times for our events and festivals, non-Jews will come, or people who are Jewish and haven't had a Jewish connection. And because we're bringing it back to the seasons and connecting it to a community of people, I believe it makes it more accessible to others. It is really important to me that our celebrations are based in the Jewish rhythms and using some of that tradition to help make our lives more meaningful. So we recently just had this past weekend, we had a Shabbat camp out, and we had about 50 people here, intergenerational. I think community is a wonderful place where we can be all different ages and support each other in our learning in that way. And what we're finding now that we've been doing these kind of gatherings for 7 years is that there's a community, like Aharon was saying, a sense of belonging, where people come and they see the same faces over and over again, and is creating a space to feel a part of something. And we have this big open field where we gather. And so it's really easy to dive into the natural world and connect with nature in that space. And it's really beautiful. And part of what we're doing is creating a sense of place for people that they can return to again and again. And we are steeping it in a tradition that brings meaning into our lives. I'm going to share my screen for just a couple more minutes. I imagine I'm getting close to time.
You have 3 more minutes.
Okay. So wait a second. So I just want to share here, this is a wheel of the year that was created from Wilderness Torah and also, but has things laid onto it from other movements as well. And so it's looking at in the center, the seasons, right, with the fall equinox, the winter, summer, and spring, and then laying on top of that, some aspects of birth and renewal and that come with those seasons. And then this is laying the holidays, the Jewish holidays that we celebrate. And so part of what Living Tree is doing is using the Jewish holidays to link to the natural earth cycles. And I'll just show you a little bit of how we're doing that. And so in the early spring around Passover, and some of the tradition is around using horseradish and the foods that are available. So we're making that connection for people. We're growing horseradish here, and making horseradish with people. So connecting to our food and the season and the holiday of freedom, which is discussing freedom is accessible for all people. In late spring, we have Shavuot, which is a celebration of the first fruits. And we have been making a pilgrimage up to a chapel that is on Mount Mansfield, which is the biggest mountain in Vermont, but it's only a mile and a half up. And so we bring our first fruits and have a celebration up there, and again, open it up to many people. And now the same people have been coming back again and again. And this year we had about 60 people, which is great after this, COVID pause. This is us again climbing the mountain, and you can see we're all the time trying to include activities that bring people together, so that they can increase their connections to one another and to themselves. And then Tisha B'Av, this year we're getting ready to do a grief ritual. This is a picture of our pavilion that you saw being built in the video, and we will gather under there and also enjoy what is available in the summer here. And our Sukkot is our harvest festival. That's our biggest festival that we're putting on, and people of all ages come and camp on the field and dwell in these temporary huts. And again, we really promote it as a harvest festival, and then using some of the tradition to bring meaning and connection to our ancestors through Sukkot. But for sure, people of all faiths are welcome and come, and it's a great way to celebrate the fall in New England, which is really beautiful as well.
Sephirah, we need to wrap up.
Yes. Okay, great. Yeah, and so we've been at it for 7 years. We're still looking for more people to join our co-housing village, but really we are building intimate connections with one another, and connecting people to themselves, to community, to the land, and to ancestral traditions. And it's been a really rich experience to do that. And yeah, thank you for listening and for the opportunity to share.
Well, thank you so much, Sephirah. So we'll take a couple of questions specific. After each presentation, we'll take questions specific to that community, and then at the end, we'll have some time for a general discussion. So, Anton, you have just a second. No, היא לא שומעת אותך. Sephirah.
Sephirah, thank you very much. That was fascinating. I've got a few questions. You can answer whichever one you feel most comfortable with. Aharon, before in his opening, talked about intentional communities having one of the things that they have as a characteristic is a mission. And I'm wondering if you can try and, in a few words, describe what your mission is as a community. That's question number one. Question number two is, what does it look like to be part, do you feel a part of a wider network? Who are your if you have connections outside of your community to other communities, to other frameworks, and what that looks like in the day to day, or are you feeling like you're alone as an island, as a community? That's my second question. And my third question is a loaded question. It's about Israel. If there is a connection, what your relationship is, if any, what that looks like.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Those
These
are
are
all,
great questions for all of them, I think.
yeah, those are all really great questions. And so, yeah, so our mission, and this is our kind of mission where we can talk more about it too, but is to redefine community, regenerate land, and to revitalize culture. And so you can see kind of those three areas that we're focused on within that mission. And so hopefully that answers your question. And we find that by doing these community events and connected to Jewish folk festivals, that's part of our revitalizing culture. And then we have this beautiful piece of property here where we're putting lots of perennials in and annuals and growing and, hopefully supporting the environment in what we're doing. And so that's the regenerate land piece. And redefining community is around the co-housing village. And so the land that we live on, we have 9 acres and the houses are just within really a 4-acre dimension. And so, and I know probably you all don't deal with acres the way we do it here, but so we're having the houses be close together, making sure that people are running into each other and have interactions together. And then together that co-housing community is taking care of the land here. Networks, it has been really essential and vital for me to be part of this Hakel network. And there are other Jewish community networks that we are a part of. And I in particular am a Kohenet Hebrew priestess, and that is another network that's been really important for me to grow with and to feel like I'm not isolated in connecting Jewish spirituality with the earth. And Aharon has served as our advisor and has really been really helpful, especially around the economic sustainability, and then finding the right people and having our systems organized. And I think, Hakel and then also the Kanisa network of communities as well, really helping to just bring my attention and bring back to my community as to the importance of a mission-driven community. And I don't think I had the words for that before, but that we're all coming together with some similar mission. And it is really, really helpful to not feel isolated and, being on this call with Roger and Deborah, being able to build connections between all of our communities, I think has made my community stronger for sure. And then connection to Israel. So we have had the opportunity through Hakel to go to Israel and see all of the work that's being done there on different models of community. And that's been really resourceful. And I personally lived in Israel when I was in my 20s for a year, and that built my connection. And right now we have a family that is living here as summer residents that live during the year in Israel. So they're helping to kind of be ambassadors, I think, for this connections to Israel through this place and building connections for people in Vermont around what it means to be Israeli and be connected to Israel. And my husband is on the call too, and I don't know if he wants to add anything else to this answer.
Anton, no. She said everything I would say, and I want to make sure there's room for the other stuff too. Thank you.
Okay.
Nice job, Sephirah.
Okay, thank you, Karen and Sephirah. We'll get back to you later. We'll have a second round of questions. But now I'd like to hand it over to Deborah, who's here with us in person from New York. Let me just put on your slideshow. Okay. You all see it back home? Okay.
Okay.
Floor is
Great.
yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Aharon. So I'm Deborah Fishman. I live in New York City, and I'm representing a community called FED, which I started. So FED is a arts and culture oriented Jewish intentional community. I'd like to show you a small snippet of what we do. This is a Seder that was pre-pandemic. It's Passover, traditional Passover meal. And Passover is a holiday of freedom. So we had an opera singer, Marquis, who started an initiative called Go Down Moshe, which is exploring parallels between slave spirituals and the Passover liturgy in order to uncover our shared heritage of slavery and redemption. So by means of explaining what that is, I'll just have a quick video. Thank you.
Oh, I need to stop sharing. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I should have thought of that.
Okay, so for technical reasons, we're going to show the video from another Zoom account, and then we'll go back to the presentation.
Okay, great. Thank you for showing that. So I think that gives a good sense of a few things. First of all, it's intergenerational, it's community focused, and I believe that music and arts and culture and also food that you saw prominently in the video have the power to connect people, to allow them to have this shared experience together, and that this opportunity can open human connection and dialogue between other people. And basically what FED does is provide a platform for ideas, for music, for art, and all kinds of different forms of creativity, usually over food, as a way of breaking down barriers and creating connections between different types of people. So FED is operating in the context of New York City and specifically in Manhattan. And you may wonder, New York City is kind of an oversaturated Jewish kind of space. Why do we need yet another Jewish project operating in Manhattan? For me, I think reinventing the wheel is an integral part of the process of making something your own, that when you step up as a leader and start organizing things for your community, it's a way of processing and making concepts current and relevant to the realities of your life. And also New York City is saturated. There's so many Jews and other people there that if you think a competition is an issue, think again. There are Jews everywhere, and I think the more is more in this kind of community. Even more so.
You have the clicker.
I have the clicker. Great, excellent. New York City is can be a very lonely and isolating kind of urban scene. We spoke a lot about urban isolation and loneliness. We speak a lot about this, and especially with the pandemic, it's only gotten worse. And this leads to major mental issues and all kinds of issues in society. So this was actually a picture that was taken at an event that FED organized. So you can see that we're trying to build that connection and create that meaningful connection, which can be a lifeline in these times of isolation and loneliness. So the question is, why aren't more people affiliating with organized Jewish life if we're all lonely and we're disaffiliated? I think the answer is that people want to be valued as individuals. They want their talents to be recognized, and they want to actively participate. And this is a scene from a Kol Nidre performance that was done again in my space, in Fed space. So this was a very creative performance. And I think in general that there's a parallel that can be drawn between Judaism and creativity, that people often say, oh, I'm not creative, I'm going to give my kids crayons and let my kids be creative, but I don't have any creativity in me. Or with Judaism, you say, oh, I'm not so learned, I'm not a rabbi, I let the other people do the Jewish ritual, I'm going to sit over here and just, and I think that when you're active and take ownership over both your own creativity and your own Judaism, it empowers you in a very specific way and makes you an active player, and it boosts your confidence and makes you a more active player in your own life. And that's what we try to foster. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about my story, which I think is relevant to community building. I grew up in a very isolated way in suburban Connecticut, and I feel like I've been searching for community my whole life as a result of the way I grew up. I found religion in college, and my parents thought my rebellion could have been worse. And I went through a bunch of organized Jewish communities and never really found one where I thought that I mattered, or I was really, my talents were seen and valued. So I moved into New York City with 2 kids, as you do. You don't do that. It's very countercultural. And I started having big Shabbat and holiday meals for people of all different backgrounds. And I found that food really brings people together, like I'm saying, and that people want to be part of something larger than themselves, whether or not they're Jewish. They want to feel valued. They want to feel a part of community. So people would say to me I was a really good cook, which I am, and that I show up in a restaurant, which I wasn't prepared to do. But what I preferred to do was start gathering people together for these meals, which I in the beginning I rented out spaces. This is an event we did in a theater where everyone had dinner on the stage. It was actually for Hanukkah. We had dinner on the stage, and then we sat in the audience and watched 2 comedians do stand-up. So this is an example of a creative event that was done. It was relatively at the beginning of Fed. And I was basically running one-off events like this. And then through both my personal journey and through the support of Oshkello primarily, and also some other Jewish organizations that are listed here, a couple things happened. First of all, it became more Jewish in nature, more exclusively Jewish, focusing on creativity through Judaism and Jewish values and traditions. And we also became more musical and creative. In the beginning, it was mostly about talks. We say it's Fed is like TED Talks, but you also get fed, was the line at the beginning. So it was dinner parties with talks, and then it grew into this whole community that's also about music and dance and theater. Here is a musical performance, also in the Fed space, that was for Havdalah. It was a kirtan performance, a Jewish kirtan experience. And so it became more Jewish, became more musical, and finally it actually became more of an intentional effort to build community rather than these one-off events. So what is community? Like, what does that even mean? We're not living together. We're experiencing these kinds of very powerful moments together, sharing time and space, as Aharon pointed out. I think it means a couple of things in this case. First of all, that it's based on values, such as openness, hospitality, inclusivity, diversity, like things that are very important, creativity, things very important to this project that everyone has in common and shares. It's also very intellectual orientation to it, about curiosity and open-mindedness. So all these values, I believe, are Jewishly inspired, and I also believe are universal, and they're really important to this idea of working together as part of this community, and also cultural Judaism, this idea of connecting to Judaism through culture. Second, I think the fact that it's mission-driven is very important. That, again, this idea of cultural Judaism is mission-driven, and we're spreading this vision of active, creative Judaism. And third, it's about the people, that we have pride in diversity and acceptance, and we're giving space for people of all backgrounds and walks of life to experience these universal messages of Judaism and see them as relevant to relate to their own lives. So the goal of the entire project is creating connection and dialogue, and food and dance and theater and all these kinds of ways are a way of advancing this conversation and creating the connection and dialogue. So I'll tell you a little more specifically about our activities. Before the pandemic, through the support of Hakel and also through ROI, we did a lot of international events where we took the model of FED and brought it to local communities and experiences and did events there. I think this idea of breaking bread together is very powerful and it has international ramifications. During the pandemic, we had a program called Fed Tables, where we mailed out challah. Yes, you can send it through the US mail, and also artistic supplies, and encourage people to have a Shabbat practice of playing with the supplies, eating the challah. And then we had a weekly Zoom call. You can see some of the ones we did with like Passover skid and Havdalah and something about working out that an Israeli artist did. So we had these Zoom calls where we connected in intimate groups called tables. We had a project called the Oiven, which is still going on. It was started last summer during the pandemic when we couldn't do indoor events. So we took the show on the road. We got a pizza oven, which is pictured here, and we toured around to lots of different communities, including Hakel communities, including Living Tree Alliance. So this is actually Sephirah's community on the right, where we did a beautiful Oiven events as part of the family camp that they had there. So really this project is about experientially kneading the dough, getting your hands dirty, creating the bread together, and then having a meal where you share the experience of making and breaking bread. And it's reclaiming the Jewish spirit of a communal oven, which is why it's called Oiven, which is actually Yiddish for oven. We also have projects now that are about creating committees of artists. You can see some of the creative works that we did, and this was an event of feedback, which is our core artist group. And really, just to summarize this is the sort of metric of how we use the values, hospitality, inclusivity, and dialogue, and the medium, the food, the art, the talks, and the people, and strategies such as network weaving and collaboration with local and global partners in order to really generate the goal, which is dialogue and connection. And this is a little by the numbers of how many people are involved with FED, and this is a photo from a FED ID retreat that was supported by Hakel and ROI that we did in Buenos Aires. And yeah, so you can see some of the numbers here, and I think that is basically the end. So
I like
thank
the
you.
eggplants.
Oh, this is about, yes, 84 eggplants a year. Yes. Okay, so I'm happy to take any questions anyone has. Yeah.
What?
Yeah, this was a question I had for Sephirah, and after hearing yours, was sort of thinking maybe I'd save it for all three of you. I think it connects. But could you say a little bit more about the lineage? I mean, you talked about the specific networks that you're in now, but looking backward, what is the lineage of the particular kind of renewal of Jewish culture that all of your communities are involved in? Does it connect to the early kibbutzim, which I think of as much more secular? Does it connect to Jewish renewal? What are the impulses?
What are the roots change?
Yeah, I mean, particularly like renewing Jewish religious practices outside synagogue contexts, for example. Where does this come from?
I think Aharon could speak of that more from an academic or like more of a that kind of context. I can just tell you that I've been Reformed, conservative, and Orthodox in my life, and I take inspiration from lots of different movements and sources all around. And I think, as I was saying at the beginning, like in the end, I felt a need to create something for myself that was my own in a sense, and invite other people to share it with me. I do think it is strongly influenced by other trends of what's going on in the larger society, such as progressive values, as Aharon was saying before, such as being grassroots and non-institutional, which is the trend that people don't want to be members these days. They want to be individuals like me and create things for themselves. I take inspiration from anything from the makers movement, like DIY kind of thing, to in the Jewish context, we've done a lot of very creative Jewish events that are sort of, I think, outside of like the Kol Nidre that you saw was a musical production that I don't think I've seen anything like it in other places. but yeah, I think in general we are influenced by different trends and experiences, but the product I think is unique. Also the Supper Club movement is the other one that we basically started essentially as a social club, as a place where people could come and eat and have a talk, and that's basically a social club, which is the whole idea of dinner parties is also a trend. You know, people inviting people for dinner parties, so that's certainly something that we can speak to and have done a lot. I don't know if that answers your question, but I don't know if Aharon has anything to add.
I'll speak later. Yeah.
I'm just trying to understand the structure very practically.
Yeah.
Is there a legal structure? You said there's a board of 5.
Yes.
Like, do you all sit geographically in the same place
Yes.
in New York? And I'm just trying to understand, apart from the global connections,
Yes.
the local connections.
Yes.
Like, you have a board and then you have members. What does it mean to be a member? Is there a payment? Is there a and then how often do you run these events in New York? Is it a weekly, like, and you say you have different committees or different groups doing different things? I'm just trying to understand what it looks like.
Sure, good question.
And how wide is your circle, your events that you do? Are they, how many people come to these events and how often? And what circles do you have outside of those 5 board members? And how big, and what is their involvement, and what is their commitment, etc.?
Yes. So we are a nonprofit, which is hence the board. The board members are all intentionally based in New York, except for one who moved to Philly during the pandemic, who was very integral to the project, so stayed involved. The members, you can actually buy membership, and we have a membership. It's actually not operating during the summer, where we're doing things with the Oivan upstate and not in the city, because a lot of people aren't around during the summer. But during the year, we have paying members who buy month-to-month membership, which includes attendance at up to 2 events, which are either Shabbat or holiday oriented. Usually, we also we have maybe on whole probably 2 to 3 events each month. And you can also pay to just come to one event. You don't have to buy the membership to show up. We also, you know, if people have needs or need to just come and not pay, I don't, you know, I'm not turning people away. But the membership includes those events, and also being part of the community, meaning, you know, access to other members' information. And we have a monthly party that's just for members to come and socialize. So yeah, we have other projects that are operating, such as the Oivan, such as the feedback group for artists, and other sort of events that pop up as collaborations with other communities and one-off kind of things like that. But the primary events we're doing are those 2 to 3 events each month where people gather. They're primarily in the space where my family lives as well, and we have events there. And we also do pop-ups in other places and internationally, as you heard, and other things. So yeah, does that answer the question?
Great. Thank you so much, Deborah. Sure. And Roger, are you with us?
I am. Can you hear me?
No, we can't hear you. Just a second. Try talking again.
I'm still here. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Okay. So Roger is from Berkeley, California, and he will be our last presenter for today. So Roger, the floor is yours. Take it.
That's great. I think I'll start. I wanted to start by answering one of the questions that was posed to Deborah, which was about the sort of the lineage of our projects. Like, does it continue a certain stream of thought or organization within Jewish life? It strikes me that we don't really. It strikes me that you know, we're not a continuation of the renewal movement or the kibbutz movement. It strikes me that most of our projects have kind of bubbled up independently. And then after that, we've sort of found the ways that we connect to these other things that are going on in Jewish life, and all have a lot in common, all have these different aspects coming at Jewish intentional community from different angles, but are all related to intentional community of some sort. So didn't want to forget to respond to that question, but I'll turn now to talking about Berkeley Moshav, and I'll share. I'll start with the presentation. So a little bit, just gonna, by way of introduction, talk about 3 things: me, Berkeley Moshav and Urban Moshav. And what are these things? I am, so I'm Roger Studley. I'm really grateful that you all are here to hear what we have to say. I serve, I'm part of Oshkello, the group that Aharon was discussing, along with Sephirah and along with Craig and along with Deborah, serve as a community advisor for some of the groups within Oshkello. I also am a convener of one particular community called Berkeley Moshav, and most of what I'll spend my time today doing is talking about Berkeley Moshav. Berkeley Moshav is a community, and then also the founder of Urban Moshav, which is a nonprofit or an NGO that's devoted to creating more communities like Berkeley Moshav. So you'll see, I'll talk about Berkeley Moshav, and then the intent is to create more communities of this sort. To unpack this a little, Berkeley Moshav, like I said, is a co-housing community. We just sort of Sephirah also, Living Tree has a co-housing community. Most of you being involved in intentional community are probably familiar with co-housing. I'll say a little more about it just to make sure we're all on the same page. In our particular case, Berkeley Moshav is a residential community, right? People will live there. We don't exist yet, by the way. We're in the process of creation. We have land. We've been designing it. We have submitted our plans to the city. We expect to move in about 2 to 3 years to build it and move in about 2 to 3 years. We will be 36 households. We have 11 members at present. So we need to build up to 36. We need to build up to 27 by the time we start construction. And one of the elements about Berkeley Moshav and about co-housing in particular is that the members, the people who intend to live together in this intentional community, design both the physical and social aspects of that community. So that's just a little to kind of organize us. So there's me doing these things. One of the things is Berkeley Moshav, which is a specific community. And then there's Urban Moshav, like I said, which is a nonprofit that's devoted to, its mission is to create more Jewish co-housing. And Berkeley Moshav is the first project. So just a little really quickly about co-housing. If it were easier, I'd have everybody raise their hands and see if you know all this and I should skip it. But the way I like to think about co-housing is with 3 key elements. One of those is intentional neighborhood, right? The idea is that, like Aharon said, you need to be close. I like to use the word proximal. People need to be actual neighbors, so they see each other every day coming and going, and you actually connect just by virtue of your daily lives with the people around you, and you make community with those people. You engage with your neighbors, which most of us that don't live in intentional communities don't often do. And that engagement creates what the co-housing world, at least in the US, talks about as community glue. I'm emphasizing neighborhood and the engagement and the community glue for a reason. I'll come to it in a second. So co-housing defined by intentional neighborhood, which happens in a context where you've got extensive common facilities. It's not just you have a house next to someone else's house next to someone else's house. It's also designed with plenty of places for people to be in community together. So I'll show some pictures in a minute to show what I mean. So you have the neighborhood, the intentional neighborhood taking place in a context of extensive common facilities, and it's a balance of communal and private life. Sometimes we start talking a lot about community and people get a little nervous about, well, what about my own personal space? So we are all going to live together on the same campus right next to each other, and we will have a balance of communal and private life. Interestingly, you all are in Denmark. Well, that's where co-housing came from. My understanding, if someone knows where this data point comes from, I'd love to know the source, is that at least 1% of the Danish population currently lives in co-housing. It was imported as a housing concept to the US about 30 years ago, and there are currently 180 co-housing communities around the United States. And so what Urban Moshav is trying to do, and what Moshav will be the first one and the first urban one, and what Living Tree is actually the first one at all, is try to take this co-housing concept, marry it with the idea of Jewish community, and create Jewish co-housing. So get to that in just a second. This is just a map to show you these 180 communities around the US and how they're distributed all around the country. And so Jewish co-housing, backing up a second, I emphasize this engagement, this community glue. The idea for Jewish co-housing is actually really super simple. It's that this engagement, this community glue, a large part of it, a big chunk of how people in the community will connect will be through their Jewish identities, through Jewish learning, culture, and ritual. The idea is that often in modern, at least in modern America, and I expect a lot of the rest of the world outside of Israel, Jewish life, if you're Jewish, your Jewish life and the rest of your life have kind of gotten compartmentalized. You don't often, unless you're in an Orthodox community, you don't often, you kind of go around in the secular world and then you sort of enter the Jewish world in order to participate in Jewish life, and then you leave it again. That means your Jewish life is compartmentalized. It means that it can feel commodified, right? More like something you consume than something of you and who you are. So the idea for doing Jewish housing, for living together and having part of our community be Jewish culture, learning, and ritual, is that Jewish life can be a natural part of daily life, to make it more like being part of the Orthodox Jewish community, more like living in Israel, more like living in the Lower East Side of New York back in the day, and that sort of thing. And so it's really this idea of marrying two concepts of community, co-housing and Jewish community, and seeing that they can be mutually supportive of one another. The co-housing is a lend support to being in Jewish community together, and Jewish community becomes part of that community glue of co-housing. So that's a kind of the idea that we're doing. We're taking co-housing, we're taking Jewish community, and we're trying to combine them together. I'm going to jump in specifically now and show you what we're doing here in Berkeley. You know, what Sephirah is doing is kind of really interesting. It's a combination of people living there and creating a small Jewish community, and having all these events and rituals and that happen in, and education that happens in their site. That's combining kind of the two things that is doing and that I'm doing. Deborah is having a residential component programming. Right now, we are working on we don't have much programming. We're working on the residential component entirely, and we'll get to the community component for the most part once we get this thing built and move in. So I'm going to show you what it is that we're creating physically. This is you know, where we're going to live together. It's urban, looks much different than Living Tree, hence urban moshav. So this would be what our building looks, a building that we're creating, what it looks like. This is a schematic diagram looking from the top down to kind of give you a sense of how, you know, we're organizing this building. And really what I want to show you, I'm going to show you two diagrams that are kind of the same. This is just focusing on the things that are in color are kind of the outside of the building, and just to show you that, you know, we're creating a building, but we're creating all this outdoor space in which to gather. Those are tables near the building, and it gets less and less structured as you get away from the building. We've got a nice big, that's a 5,000 square foot outdoor courtyard that we've got for this building. And then if I show you the same diagram and focus on the internal parts, what I really want to show you is, I mentioned earlier, like we have to create shared spaces in which to make community, and we've got a lot of that here. This is labeled retail. That's just to satisfy the city. That's actually going to be a combination exercise studio and art studio. I know those don't sound like they go together, but it'd be a good multiple use of space. We've got storage for 50 bicycles. Here's a lounge for people to hang out and have meetings together and watch TV together and things of that nature. We've got our great room, our Hadar Ochel, where we'll eat together. Communal kitchen. You can see this is a playroom here for kids that's very accessible to the kitchen and the great room, so that people, that you don't have to watch your own kids. The people in the great room, the people cooking a meal, can watch them for you there. We've got communal laundry, whatever. We've got communal guest rooms. You won't need a space in your home to house your guests. There'll be two rooms that are shared by the community that people can take turns using when people come to visit them. It's also a community. Often what happens in the co-housing community is people will go away and say, anyone need to, you know, house your guests in my home, feel free, I'll be gone for the month of June, that kind of thing. So just to give you a sense of, you know, all of this is infrastructure to support community, the same as all of this outdoor space is infrastructure to support community. Just want to, clear that, and I want to, all right, so moving on. I want to make a point, because we're really focused on building, and we're really focused on building something urban and having this be an urban space that can support community. So one of the ways that we do this is we have the design of what we're building support community. What I want you to notice here is that on the left and on the right, this is looking from the north side of our building down to the south side of our building. what I want you to notice is that the building, the way it's designed is it's not a corridor. It's not a hallway. The homes are pushed apart from one another. That, first of all, that lets a lot of light filter down and makes it a nicer space. But it also creates these platforms. I don't know if you can see, whoops, I don't know if you can see my mouse, but there's platforms in front of each cluster of homes at the south end, and they're also here on the north end, where those are designed to be spaces where people can gather, where people can congregate, where people can make community. So this is just one example of a feature that when you're thinking about, when in the co-housing model at least, when you're thinking about creating intentional community, you're thinking about how your design, your physical design of your space where you live can support that community. Even on the right-hand side on the top floor here, you can see
Roger,
the catwalk is, yep.
let's take
Hello?
1 more minute. So we'll have some, let's
Oh,
take 1 more
all right,
minute so we
let me move
have
on.
some
Let me
for
move on.
questions, okay?
Got it. So you get a sense of what it looks like. I want to talk about just our vision really quickly. A multi-generational co-housing community, mutual support, living lighter on the planet, celebration of Jewish holidays and traditions, and diversity in family composition, Jewish observance, every way we can imagine being diverse. Our vision is to create a vibrant community where everyone who wants can participate in the rhythms of Jewish life, in the context inclusive of both secular and religious Jews, and welcoming people from all traditions. I can say more in the Q&A. This is about how we imagine, Jewish life is there's a lot of different ways of practicing of Jewish life, of experiencing and expressing your Judaism. This is a slide about how we intend to coexist with one another. This is a slide about, how you join, how you get involved. It's a commitment. It's a commitment of time and a significant commitment of dollars. We ask people to spend 30 to 90 days trying us out before they jump in and become a member. I can say more about that if folks are interested. Another picture of what it might look like, and just to remind us that we are a community of people. These are a bunch of people. Some of these are members, some of these are visitors who were taking a site tour of the property that we're going to build on in the neighborhood where we are going to build this. So I'll leave it there and just kind of give you a sense of what it is that we're trying to create here in Berkeley, and take any questions.
Great, thank you so much, Roger. Should be fascinating, like all presenters. Anton? Yeah. Anyone else wants to ask, or people? Oh, I forgot. Right, we have people online. How do we check for people online? You want to ask any questions?
There are no hands raised currently on.
Oh, okay. Great. So, Anton, let's send it over to you.
Hi, Roger. Nice to see you.
Hey, Anton.
Thank you for that presentation. It looks amazing. Those sketches look incredible. I've got two questions. One, very practical question. How big are your family units in square? I only understand square meters, so I'll have to translate if you give it to me in square feet. That's my first question. And my second question is, it looks very expensive. I guess that's something that's thrown at co-housing projects regularly all around the world. And I noticed that when it talks about diversity, and my assumption is that there's not going to be a particular diverse population in terms of socio-economic abilities to buy a purpose-built house in a community. So I'm wondering what your thoughts are on that and how you relate to that question specifically in terms of diversity.
Yeah, so the questions were about affordability, and the first one was about size. I can't translate into meters in my head. The homes are on the order of the smallest ones, 1 bedrooms, 1 bath, or 700 square feet, all the way up to about 1,450 square feet. So it's from
that's about 150, 200 square meters. No. Sorry, no. That's too much. No.
So I'll just say.
We'll figure this out.
Think of it in terms of bedrooms and bathrooms. There's 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, all the way to 3 bedroom, 2 bathroom, or 3+ bedroom, 2 bathrooms. So varying sizes. In terms of cost, yes, it is expensive. And not only is it expensive, We're doing this in one of the most expensive housing markets in the US. So it's, it's even expensive there. Now, as it turns out, though, the cost of living in Berkeley Moshav is not any higher than the cost of living in Berkeley in particular. So, we're kind of stuck with that, and we're stuck with what it costs to build the housing. That's one side of things. On the other side of things, we are attempting to make this more affordable in a couple of ways. Being that we're doing this in a Jewish context, there is a world of philanthropically minded people out there who would like to support diversity in a Jewish project. We're not looking to these people to give us money, however. We're looking for them to loan money in order to make one of two things possible. One thing they can do is they can put in their money in the project by owning one of the homes and turning it into a rental. And if you do that, that makes it a little, at least to some households, it makes it more affordable to rent rather than to own. The other thing that we're looking at doing is something called equity sharing, where an investor would come along and, again, not give money, but invest money. And they would own, say, half of your home. So they would co-invest with you. They would be a co-owner of your home. They would put in some of the money. You would put in some of the money. You would get to live there. They would get, eventually down the road, when you leave that home and sell it to somebody else, they would get a return, which includes the appreciation in the price, and maybe a little more than that. And so by doing that, if someone's willing to own half of a home and let you live there by owning the other half, that theoretically reduces the expense to you by about half. Now, can we do that? We don't yet know. We've had some encouraging signs, and we're just turning toward that aspect of the work. But if we can, that's at least a way to make it more affordable in Berkeley, which is one of the most expensive markets in the country. The only other thing I'll add is that if we get to the finish line with this, if we pull this off in Berkeley, the most expensive market in the country, which I wish I had lived somewhere else and could do it somewhere less expensive. But it will at least make me feel like I've proven the concept in one of the hardest places to do it. And so if we try this in other cities where housing and construction costs are lower, hopefully we'll be able to do it there as well. It'll be easier to do it there than it was to do it here.
Okay. Do we have any other questions? Should we wrap up? Well, although it's still light outside, it's going to stay light until midnight because it's Denmark. But it is 9:30 p.m. People are tired. So first of all, huge thank you and applaud to Sephirah, Deborah, and Roger for sharing their visions, their dreams, their communities with us. Thank you for being with us. I will just conclude with two sentences. I did skip most of the first part of my presentation. It talks about the crisis of loneliness and its implications, not only on individuals, but also on our democracies. Because once you take the community piece out of society, all you have is individuals and nations or ideological movements, then it jeopardizes the stability of our society. And things like we showed in the beginning, it drives polarization and atomization, which is dangerous for our own social structures. And what we see here is, it's first and foremost, yes, it is for the Jewish people to preserve its own heritage and tradition and pass it on to the next generation in a way which is not exclusive of other denominations or people or religions. But on the other hand, it also has value together with all the other communities that we see in this conference and other conferences and other networks, has value for our democracies and societies in general, but it stabilizes the system. Communities have the tendency to draw people to the middle, not in a compromised way, in a, I would say more, how do you say metinut? A non-extreme way of life, in a conversational way of life. So with that in mind, thank you all for sharing with us. Thank you all for coming in person, online. We'll see you tomorrow.